I work in the State Chancellor's office here in Sacramento over the community college system. We have 112 colleges, California community colleges, 112, soon to be 113. It's the largest system of higher education in the entire United States. And we serve millions of students, literally, and about 125 to 130,000 students with disabilities per year. And I'm here tonight to talk to you about transitioning from high school to college, hopefully give you some resources that you can take away in terms of accessing those services, and go forward from there and answer any questions that you may have. So again, my personal experience is primarily working at administrative level, supporting programs and colleges that provide services to students with disabilities, not necessarily providing them personally myself, although I do have quite a bit of background working with students and also being a community college student myself and in a lot of different capacities. I want to start with one of the first sort of issues that you or your child may face when you first transition from high school to community college and you're looking to receive services for students with disabilities. And that is just actually finding finding the office, finding the right person to talk to and accessing those services. And that is, within our statute and regulations, our program is called Disabled Student Program and Services, or DSPS. However, not all of the colleges actually call their disability program DSPS, don't necessarily use that title. In fact, there's a trend towards moving away from the use of the word disability in the title of the services for students with disabilities. So that's going to be sort of what the first challenge is, just finding out the name of the program, who operates the program, where it's at on campus. They're titled things like accessibility services or educational support services or maybe the DRC, Disability Resource Center, things like that. So those are some of the key words you want to look out for. There was fairly recently a piece of legislation passed that impacted the community colleges greatly called the Student Success Act. And in part what that did was require that all students go through 3 fundamental core matriculation components. And this is all students. And that is education planning, placement and assessment, and also an orientation. So so all students are going to receive an orientation regardless of which of the 112 colleges you go to. Now there are different models that are out there. A best practice is if a college sets up the orientation, their general orientation, where they also provide information on support services such as DSPS and actually begin that process right there in day one. Others, they'll just mention student services and then give you a referral and you'll sort of have to begin the process there. But that is a new requirement. So many colleges were already doing orientation, both general and DSPS specific, but that's a fairly new requirement. Another way to find the correct information is through our statewide directory as well. And I can give you our website and another website that has both that directory and some other resources. Our website is www.cccco.edu, so that was 4 C's and O.edu. And then you can do a direct link to DSPS there, and then the directory is there. We keep that updated. It's very dynamic. It includes contact information, who the program coordinator is, the address, the title of the program at each of the 112 colleges, and also a list of some services as well. That's another way, if for whatever reason you're unsuccessful in the orientation, to figure out who you should be speaking to on the front end. That's another way to get that information. I've personally been on about 1/4 of our campuses in the system physically. And in most cases, the DSPS or disability office is within the student services building. It's not always the case, believe it or not, but in most cases, if you can find the student services building, you'll find DSPS. There's a trend towards sort of a one-stop shop model for all student services. So whether it be financial aid or general counseling or disability services, very often there's like a one desk that kind of covers registration for all of those programs, and then you refer to the correct counselor. You're basically coming into this, you or your child, who if you're going to enroll in community colleges soon, like next year or the following year, are really coming into this system under a very different and better budgetary climate than just a year or 2 years ago. Things have improved significantly in the last 2 years to the tune of $15 million more into our program last year and an additional $30 million this year. So what that means to you are colleges are restoring services that have been lost after we went through this budget recession at the state level where our programs were cut significantly. So you're going to see, especially as we move forward, more staff, more counselors, colleges that were previously doing learning disability assessment, for example, many of those dropped providing that service at the college when the budget cuts hit. They're now starting to hire those resources back. You'll see more appointment times availability, things like that. So, and that'll only hopefully continue to improve in the future. But this message is quite a bit different in terms of finding and accessing services and getting those services turned around quickly than it was just a year or two ago. Still, with that said, we strongly recommend you get in as early as possible and meet with a counselor, determine eligibility for the program. If you need to bring documentation in, which I'll talk about here shortly, to bring that documentation in and to begin work on that accommodations plan as soon as possible. In post-secondary education, institutions are per federal laws, are required to engage in an interactive process between the institution and the student in developing that accommodations plan based on their educational or functional limitations. So that it really is a two-way street that begins with those initial counseling appointments and talking about the services that are available at that individual college, which does vary from college to college. And getting that plan documented and begin to work with faculty if you do need to have things like testing accommodations or extended time on tests, things like that. So the earlier the better. Next would be eligibility. So the eligibility requirements to receive services in our system are essentially that you enroll in the college and you have a disability that results in an educational or functional limitation, period. Okay, so that is the requirement. The issue is, how does the college document or verify that requirement? And per our regulations, there are 3 different ways that can happen. One is, depending on what the disability is, you may need to bring in outside documentation. That could be a doctor's or medical records. It could be an IEP that showed you had a history of a disability. It could be something tangible such as that. Or there are 2 other eligibility pathways as well. One is the college, in the absence of that verification, can do and often does conduct an assessment themselves. So they do an in-house assessment. LD assessment is the classic example of that for learning disabilities, where they test you, they determine per our model that the student has a disability and then serves the student under DSPS. And then third is actually they do have a qualified coordinator or professional staff does have the ability to do a visual observation as well and document that visual observation when that's appropriate and applicable. So again, to not knowing which of those pathways that you or your child is going to go down, the earlier that you can get in, the better, and whatever prior documentation if you already have, if you do have tangible documentation, you want to bring that to those first appointments. Some programs, again, this is one of those services I talked about that was lost when we had the budget cut and are now starting to be restored, are summer bridge programs. So if you're an incoming freshman out of the K-12 system, many of the programs, many of the colleges will offer a summer bridge program as well that will help orient you with some of the transition issues we're going to talk about going to college. And often they introduce support services at that stage as well. And it's really a good, hence the name, a good bridge from K-12 into post-secondary. Next, I'd like to talk about the handout that I think you all should have. I believe Steve distributed that. It's called Differences Between High School and College for Students with Disabilities. I'm not going to read this to you or go through. I think it's a good document. It's a really good tool, particularly for parents who've been very involved in advocacy and working with their student in the K-12 system, and now they're going to transition into college, and you're going to see some different expectations and some different sort of standards, if you will. So I think the document is good for that purpose. In the interest of time, I'm just going to highlight a few that I think are pretty key. One, you'll notice in K through 12 system are protected, students in the K through 12 system, K through 12 system are protected both by laws that are more oriented around civil rights and also student success. The laws governing the DSPS program and community colleges as it relates to students with disabilities and accommodations are really primarily civil rights laws, and it's about equal access. So it's about providing accommodations and auxiliary aids to even the playing field, to give that student an equal access to the curriculum and educational offerings of the institution, period. And then at that point, it's really up to the student to obtain success, educational success, given that equal access. So it's a little bit of a different twist than what you're used to. Next, students are really expected to self-advocate, to advocate for themselves too. As I mentioned, DSPS is not going to find you. You have to go and find DSPS. You need to work with the counselor, work with the faculty in that interactive process, you being the student, to get the correct accommodations and necessary accommodations to ensure that equal access. In K through 12, teachers have much more broad flexibility in modifying curriculum and changing courses, changing the way courses are structured and their pace and their individual assignments. In our system, there's not as much flexibility. There's a burden where the institution has to provide accommodations, but only up to the point where it would not constitute a fundamental alteration of the course. At that point, the college does not have to go that far, and you would have to explore options such as maybe substituting one course for another, or in some cases even waiving that course if you're going down a particular degree path. Parental involvement. Parents do not automatically have access to their student records, in this case their child's records. In the community college system, they would have to either have a waiver or release signed by the student to grant you access. And then the last thing I want to hit on before I pass the mic is not actually, I believe, on this form, but in the spirit of this form I thought was important to mention, and that is another difference that we're making headway in is sort of our, as a system, ability and success in serving students with intellectual disabilities and autism. We're really a little bit behind the curve of behind the K-12 system in developing more inclusive courses, a more inclusive curriculum where you're actually in regular classes and getting in-class accommodations for that particular population. Historically, they've generally been separated out in what they're called special classes that are sort of separate from the regular course offerings. That we're sort of moving away from that model and moving towards a more inclusive model. We've got several partnership programs where we've developed career-based programs where students with intellectual or disabilities or autism are served in a combination of general classes and special classes to sort of that are all very job-centered, and we have a whole program called College to Career where we have 5 sites, and we're close to adding 3 more sites that offer those types of programs. And luckily, there's one right here in Sacramento as well at Sacramento City College as well. So, and I can share more information about that at the end of the panel if you'd like to hear about that. Otherwise, hopefully the handouts are helpful, and then I'll be around for questions as we move forward.
And just to kind of underscore what Scott shared, we're very similar in terms of the legal guidance in terms of what our charge is. One of the main differences, though, we're at the University of California at Davis, so we're one of many of the UC campuses, so we're right here in UC Davis. The community college system in California is an open campus system, so you don't need to meet admission criteria to go there. But for the University of California and for the California State University system, like CSU Fresno, CSU Sacramento, there is admission criteria, and so that has to be met by any individual who wants to go to any of those campuses, including UC Davis. And all of that information is web-based now, and the criteria for meeting the admission criteria, you can get that from the high school that you're at, or If you're already at a community college and you're interested in transferring, that would be with the counselors at the community college campus as well. For my background is in language processing. I'm a learning disability specialist. I've been at UC Davis for almost 30 years. Prior to that, I was at the community college, and I wore that hat, and I did testing, taught classes, as did Abby. And so now we're at UC Davis, and our role there is to meet with students to review documentation that you would provide us so that we could determine your eligibility for services. So first, you're admitted, you apply, you're admitted, and then if you're interested in services, then you would provide our office, which is the Student Disability Center, and we did provide handouts, which are over to the side here of the room, with more information on how to contact us. You would want to meet with us, a phone appointment, in person, to explore more about the kinds of accommodations that you would be interested in or the kinds of accommodations that you may have had in the past. We do not do any testing to diagnose any disability. That is all done in private practice from professionals, medical doctors, clinical psychologists, ophthalmologists. We will take community college documentation if it is comprehensive. So if there are any difficulties there, we will act as a liaison for you to try to get that information in its totality. So our charge, again, is to be there to answer your questions, to meet with you, but you first need to meet the admission criteria. We don't have any, we have no ability to overrule that because Davis, like any other four-year school, is very difficult, and so it may not be for everybody, but for those that are interested and it has what you're interested in, then you'd want to contact our office as well, especially if you think you're going to need accommodations. Once we've determined your eligibility and had that interactive process, as Scott mentioned, with you, that everything is in order and this is what it looks like in terms of what we can offer you for accommodations. And typically that's extended time for time in class exams. For students that Abby and I typically work with, students that have dyslexia, that have ADD, ADHD, or that may have a myriad of those kinds of things, anxiety, depression, what have you. We're going to want the proper documentation, but typically that would include for students that we're talking about here, extended time for timed in class exams, including quizzes, including lab practicums, wherever there's a timed component. And maybe in a separate room, because if you're dyslexic, it is kind of important that you be able to hear yourself talk out loud. And if you studied that way, then you're going to want to retrieve information that way as well. And we try very hard to talk with students and try to understand what they think they're going to need, why they've had certain things in the past, what they think might work now. So it's a very fluid, dynamic kind of process. And if we can't do something for you, we're going to explain that as best we can as to why we can't. So a word that's out there a lot is reasonable. It won't be perfect, but we will reasonably try to accommodate you throughout this process. I've worked with lots and lots of students over the years, as Abby has, and I've seen a lot of students go on and do a lot of wonderful things. But I've also seen some students who have come to Davis who it wasn't a good fit. That they really wanted to take on a major that was much more applied and not as theoretically based. They really didn't want to eventually be a researcher, a university instructor, that sort of thing. So I think thinking about what it is that you want to do before you apply to college, whether it's a four-year college like UC Davis or the community college system, to think about what you truly think you want to do, and also to look at what the job market is out there too, because college is extremely expensive now. The University of California is, as I understand it, still in negotiations. We are not as fortunate right now to have the funding that perhaps the community colleges have now in terms of their mission. But with that said, we're optimistic. We do have staff to work with you. And I think if this is something that you really want to do, and the UC system is something that is a match, then certainly by all means contact us so we can have some further discussion. And I think Abby probably has quite a bit to offer too. Yes.
She's still thunder there.
I know.
I know, there's some black.
I know that there's
And
paint
we'll
there.
answer your questions afterwards too, so
Yeah.
if we miss something.
I'm Abby Tilden. I'm also a disability specialist with UC Davis. Previous to that, I was at UC Berkeley for 10 years. So I know the difference between a semester system and a quarter system. And it's not for everybody, myself included. But one of the things we were asked about is, prior to coming here was, could you give us some of the nuts and bolts of what a good working relationship would be with a support counselor. So in considering that, the first thing that comes to mind for me is timeliness. If in any event you decide that a four-year college is for you, the best thing to do is to locate the department and start the conversation, even as you're applying, even as you're considering it. It can't hurt getting in touch with them and just talking with someone. There will always be someone there. I'm hopeful. There will always be someone there who will be available to talk to you about what the program offers and to help you decide. In some instances, we get a lot of students who've put out applications and they're waiting to hear, and in the meantime, they might mail us some documentation or start the conversation. Maybe they haven't accepted or been accepted, but it starts the process. So the earlier that we have the opportunity to sit with you, to review your documentation, to introduce ourselves and sort of tell you about our department and decide if the documentation meets the criteria, that gives us time to sort of fill in the blanks so that we're not working in the first week of classes, which often happens, trying to scramble around and get things organized, and which is, I'm sure all of you can imagine what a transition to a college environment, be it a community college or a four-year college, it's huge. It's much different, and I think all of us have emphasized that with our handouts, the difference between going to college and being in a K-12 environment or high school environment. It's a huge transition, a transition for everyone, parents included, not just students. So we're all, there's a lot of jockeying, and getting your information in early and making a connection with someone in a disability office as early as possible is always in your best interest. Another issue we often see is that sometimes students come out of the high school and they think, I'm really going to be on top of it this year. I can handle my stuff. I know what I'm doing. I got it cornered. I don't need my parents involved. I don't need somebody to tell me. I'm just going to put my shoulder to the wheel and do it. And I think that's a noble idea, and in some instances, maybe, but I would always err on the side of being prepared. Be over-prepared rather than under-prepared. So if you are an individual who's transitioning to college and you've utilized accommodations in the past, it's in your best interest to move forward and at least speak to someone and have your information in the SDC office. Ours is called SDC, Student Disability. So in the event you decide or you go, whoa, I think I made a mistake, I need some help. It's all in place, and then you can access that information and work with your counselor and be a little more immediate than coming in after the fact. It's really sad when I sit with a student who I found out has utilized accommodations in the past, thought he or she could make it on their own, and had a really bad transition. Our goal in working with students is to hopefully let you know that we're your advocates, that we're on your team, and we want to see you succeed. And especially in the first semester or quarter, it can be very difficult. So I would encourage you to get things in early, start the conversation. You don't have to act on it. You get to make that decision, but at least you have all your ducks in place or in a row, kind of thing. Let's see, and one of the things that when we think about commonalities in terms of students who succeed, I'm always, something to think about is self-determination. And what that means is your ability to follow through, make connections with your professors, make connections. In other words, it become result-oriented rather than, I'm in trouble, I'm failing. Kind of get to the point where you know, okay, I need to talk to a tutor, I need to go see my TA, I need to get back to my disability specialist and talk to her or him about how, what's going on, and sort of kind of getting ahead of the fall. And do you have any?
Well, I was just going to say that the other piece that's really different between high school and college is that you're kind of on your own, and I think Scott has shared a lot about that. But no one's going to come to you. You're going to have to come to us. But if you come to us, then we can talk about preventative measures. We can be a liaison for when you work with those, even now, 30 years later, really strident, difficult faculty who really don't want to, whether it's an issue of convenience or they really don't believe you have a disability, it doesn't really matter. But it is a difficult, awkward situation when you have to negotiate with a faculty member to put accommodations in place. So that's one of the roles that we serve, is to be a liaison and kind of help to bridge some of that, to give you some pointers. It doesn't feel very democratic when you're at the mercy of a faculty member to put an accommodation in place for you. Anyway, so we can help to streamline that some, be a go-between and talk with the faculty member. With that said, though, I do want to say that the majority of faculty on the Davis campus, and then talking to colleagues throughout the other systems, are typically terrific, and it's not an issue. There are struggles with space and proctors and things like that, but you know, with a little extra effort, that's usually worked out. But there are always, just like in real life, there are always going to be some rascals out there that are really going to make it tough, and we just have to, it's a learning opportunity for them, and helps build some strong skills in you in terms of how to be more of a self-advocate in a positive manner, and help them understand how important this is. And it's really important to you as the student, more so than it is the faculty members. So just learning how to articulate that with them, and certainly we try to help with that too.
Chris and Abby called me up literally last week and said, hey, we got this thing. Would you like to come and talk? I'm like, well, what am I talking about? And so what they've asked me to do is to kind of relay my experiences through the educational system. And I promise I won't go back to my early childhood, but I will tell you a little bit about my life. And since the majority of people here are transitioning from high school into college, I think I'll start with high school. And finishing high school. I talked my way through high school, right? So a lot of you kids out there may recognize that. That was my coping mechanism long before they understood what learning disabilities were. And I was charming, and teachers loved me, and I was into all kinds of mischief, but I talked my way through school. I didn't do tests very well, I didn't do homework very well, and when I finally came to graduation, there was 2 promises I made to myself. Having grown up in a construction family, I swore to myself I was never getting into construction, and I was never going to college. So immediately, as life always does, I was proved wrong. So I got out of high school and thought, hey, I'm on my own. This is great. I'm never going to college, so let's go join the Marine Corps. And first thing they do in the Marine Corps is they put me into 2 years of school. Okay. So I was lucky I got to choose things that interested me, and since I wasn't going to do construction anymore, I got into aviation. So they put me into 2 years of school in electronics and all that, and I was excited to get out, by the way. And luckily we were in peacetime, so I didn't have to deal with any of those issues. But when I got out, I was fully expecting to walk into a thriving aviation industry, since I lived in Washington State, and the jobs were just going to be falling all over me, and life was going to be good. Right? That's what all of us young people think. I'm still young, by the way. So as I got out into the aviation industry, I suppose this was the mid to late 90s, or 80s, I'm sorry, the aviation industry tanked. And I know Chris Odell was saying earlier, you know, you want to choose the profession. You want to look at something and look at the career potential of that. So I did none of those things, and of course got out into a recession where, you know, aviation, there were no jobs. So as I muddled through for the next couple of years, I finally realized, well, okay, I got to go to college. Right? If I'm going to do something, I better go to school. So I'm a huge advocate of the community college system because that's exactly where I went. And this time I was up in Seattle, and I went to the community college that had an aviation program. It's an applied program where, you know, I could get other than military experience in aviation. So again, I talked my way through community college, and it was small, and again, an applied program. It was great. So I get done with the aviation electronics program there, and again, thinking I'm going to walk into a great job. Now, I did. I moved up a little bit. I ended up down here in California working for Japan Airlines. So as I learned early in the aviation industry, there are huge peaks and valleys of employment. So a couple years into working with Japan Airlines, I find myself unemployed again because it crashed again. Okay, so at that point, that's when I said, okay, all right, I need to go back and I'm going to get an electronics engineering degree. So I, again, joined the community college system in Napa, at Napa Community College. And I started on the engineering curriculum. Again, community college is great because they are smaller classes. They are more flexible. The professors you're able to interact with. So although I was doing all right on tests, and actually I was getting the grades, but again, I was kind of talking my way through that. And demonstrating to all the professors that I could actually master the material. So as I start wandering through electrical engineering, you know, I learned that I should be looking at the industry to see if there are any jobs and things out there. And as I started looking at electrical engineering, again, that was cyclical and there were no jobs out there. And at the time, I got so bored with electrical engineering, I couldn't see straight. So I said, all right, I'm gonna change my major. I'm gonna get out of Napa JC and I'm gonna go to UC Davis. Right. So I had no idea how to get into UC Davis, but I did learn a long time ago that you need to go ask people. And that was a hard lesson to learn, actually. It took me a lot of years in community college, I won't tell you how many, before I learned to go ask people. And so I finally went to a counselor there at Napa College, and that counselor kind of said, well, first of all, you have to choose a degree from the community college because you have so many units that we have to give you an associate's degree of some sort. And I said, okay, what do I qualify for? So they went through everything, and apparently I qualified for an associate of applied science. So I got one of those. At the same time, he signed me up for the guaranteed transfer agreement. I don't know if they still do that. No. Which is a phenomenal way to get into the UC system, and I believe Sac State and the others have the same program. Great way to go. So the guaranteed transfer agreement said that as long as I took a certain curriculum and I took these courses and I did well in those courses, that I would be accepted on a guaranteed basis to the UC system. So I thought that was fantastic. I didn't have to go through all the other, you know, route that you would take from, you know, traditionally from high school straight into a four-year university. Plus it saved a lot of money, by the way, parents, in case you're wondering. So as I went into UC Davis. Now, everybody with disabilities will find a wall that they hit in education, and some hit it early. Some, like me, don't hit it until I'm in my first year at UC Davis. Now, that was an eye-opener, right? So when I started in the UC system, and it is fundamentally different than the community college system. One, the pace is dramatic. It's dramatically different. I felt like somebody had just grabbed the top of my hair and, it just jerked me along, trying to catch up. So keep that in mind as you're going. They are a completely different place. Again, you have to be very committed and want to do this. If there is a doubt, it took me, I don't know, I was 26 before I decided to really go get a bachelor's degree. So, take whatever time you need to make sure that that's the right thing for you to do. So as I jumped in, again, I had no idea what learning disabilities were, and I had no idea what the Disability Resource Center was or any of the services that these people provide. As I'm into my second quarter at UC Davis and I'm failing classes and I can't figure out why because I'm actually tutoring the other students in the class. Okay, I am struggling to even make the grades, and I'm about ready to get thrown out of UC Davis. I finally went to a professor in mechanical engineering, which makes no sense whatsoever that he would know anything about this stuff. And I went after I failed a test, and I said, you know what, I don't get it. I don't understand. I can teach you this class. And in fact, I had been paying my way through school by teaching those classes to other students. Okay, so he said, fine, show me. And I took the next hour and a half with this professor, and I went through his entire course. And I explained it to him, and I drew it up on the board, and I went through it. And by the time I was done, he said, he just looks up at me, and he says, you need to call this person. Okay, and that happened to be Chris O'Dell. And so I was like, what is this place? And he goes, no, really. He said, just enough, just go over there. So as I staggered into the Disability Resource Center, I ran into Chris O'Dell, and she must have seen the look on my face because she just grabbed me and said, it'll be okay. And she walked me into her office, and she sat down, and I said, what is this? What is this place? And she said, oh, we'll get to that. Why don't you just answer a few questions for me? Okay, and as she asked some questions and went through her thing, she goes, oh, okay. You need to call this person over here, which happened to be a speech therapy company that does diagnostic testing, which is, side note, where I ended up meeting my wife. So, so they do have a dating service. Oh, man, that's so funny. 16 years we've been together. So anyway, Chris O'Dell started to explain to me what learning disabilities were. And of course, I suppose this was the early days of the Disability Resource Center, right? Mm-hmm. Fairly early. And so I went and did the diagnostic testing, and of course tested with a whole host of language processing disorders and auditory processing, and she would know more about it than I did. So went through the whole system at UC Davis. Chris was fantastic with the rest of the staff. They got me note takers. They started dealing with accommodations. Now, it was an interesting challenge because I was about the only engineer at the time, I think. There was a handful of us that engineers had gone through that. Apparently, we weed ourselves out long before we, but I wasn't quite smart enough to realize that. So we started establishing different accommodations and, again, different techniques. And that becomes a real personal thing. it is really something that I had to develop the coping skills and what kinds of accommodations would actually work in math and science. Okay? And so we worked really diligently to try to explain to professors that, again, taking the test by myself in another room, even just something as simple as that, you know, the extended time is always an issue for, you know, certainly in math and science as well as the other courses, but in math and science, it's traditionally all about how fast you can get this done, right? So, long story short, you know, I ended up understanding what learning disabilities are, and I learned how to incorporate coping mechanisms that applied to my field. Okay, and as a result, I started working at this speech therapy service and ran a math and science program for them to teach coping mechanisms to students with disabilities. And at the same time, that kind of evolved into, I became a contributing author to a college preparatory math program for 7th and 8th graders, and worked at the Crest Center doing that. And if for any of those high school students out here that have had CPM, I am the narrator in that course. So I have an active character through the whole course, explaining to people, you know, to students, what this course is. So after I successfully navigated the engineering curriculum at UC Davis, I became a serial entrepreneur, so they say. And, you know, oh, one last thing I got to say. When I got out of engineering, I decided to go into civil engineering away from electrical engineering, right? So remember that promise I made to myself about never going into construction. Okay, so here I finally did it, and I had all kinds of great justification for jumping into civil engineering. And one of the promises I made to myself in college was, okay, I'll do civil engineering, but I'm never going to do structures. I'm never going to do that. So the first job I had out of college was working on all the major bridges in the Bay Area. So I helped build the new Carquinez Bridge, and actually worked on the Bay Bridge, the new Bay Bridge, and several of the other ones. So I went straight into structures. And since then, I've gotten out of structures, and I do civil and environmental engineering. I have designed and patented at least 6 different patents in wastewater treatment and resource recovery systems. Got another half a dozen or more in the works, and run a fairly successful business. So there is a way to navigate the system, and I guess in closing with this, it's really about first making sure that's what you want to do. It is a lot of work. There are no shortcuts. It is trying both mentally and physically. The hours are grueling. Okay. Now, with that said, you know, it's very rewarding. So as long as you're clear that that's what you want to do, you try to look ahead, choose a course of study that you like, that you're passionate about, it makes the effort more worthwhile. So hopefully that story will resonate with some of you, and you'll be able to take things from it.
This is my experience at Sear College. This is what my PowerPoint's about. That's me in front of the billboard at Sear College. Application process. When I decided to attend Sear College, I first had to complete an online application. The online application introduced me to the campus and the services that are available. When I got the email that I was accepted, I called the assessment office and set up an appointment to take a test for math and English. This assessment told me which math and English classes that I needed to sign up for. Once the assessment was completed, I had to make an appointment with the counselor so I can register for classes. That's me in front of the DSPS building. Sps Services. I brought my IEP from high school and met with a counselor in the program. Mark is my counselor and writes my accommodations for classes and helps me pick the classes I need to take. For more information, you can visit sierracollege.edu/DSPS. My accommodations. The accommodations I get from DSPS are a note taker, smart pen, use of a calculator, alternate testing place, extended time on tests, extended time on assignments with approval from instructor, priority registration, computer for testing. This is what the smartphone pen looks like. The smart pen's an accommodation that makes note-taking easier. By using this pen, I will not miss anything the instructor or students say. At the beginning of a lecture, I turn the pen on and it begins to record the lecture. When I write keywords, the pen will remember where in the lecture that word was recorded. If I touch the pen to the keyword, it will take me to the part of the lecture where the word is found. The pen allows me to listen to the entire lecture without trying to take detailed notes. I can always go back and listen to the lecture again or find the parts that I want to hear. Headphones can be connected to it, or the lectures can be uploaded to a computer. If you want more information, you can visit www.livescribe.com. Campus resources. The resources I have used on campus include ILP algebra classes, math lab, LRC, Learning Resource Center, tutoring, FYE, first experience classes, first year experience classes, student success workshops. These workshops had me step outside my comfort zone and be part of the community for a little while. ILP and Math Lab. The Individualized Learning Program classes are offered for elementary and intermediate algebra. It gave me support and tutoring with math. It was great for me because math was hard for me and the extra help allowed me to be successful in the class. Classes meet more often and are shorter than the regular classes. The math lab is open to students in the class and gives homework, tutoring, a quiet testing environment, and a place to take quizzes. One thing that was great for me was the exam reviews that were given before each exam. The same type of math problems that were on the review were on the test. I could also take the test again if I did not get a good score on the first test. The resource allowed me to be successful in math. My major is mechatronics. It is about electronics and mechanics and has to do with working on robots and computers. I like it because it is interesting and I like learning about it. Can't read my future, but I might like a job that uses the knowledge and skills I have from my mechatronics class. My support staff. My regional center day program supports me at college. I have the same 3 support staff in my from my class. Kara supported me in my computer class on Thursday. She would wait in the room next door, and after class, she would drop me off at home. Carol takes me to the computer class on Tuesdays, and in the later part of my first semester, she went in the class with me. She sits next to me and takes some notes. She takes me home after class. Scott is the person who works with me the most. Scott graduated from Sierra College with a degree in mechatronics, so he has taken the classes before. I got to spend time with him and get to know him before I started class. Last semester, he went with me in my English classes on Monday and Wednesday, and he went with me to my mechatronics class on Thursday morning. Scott takes notes and we talk about the material after class. Sometimes he waits outside the class and I go on my own.
My name is Scott Boughton, and I initially I was going to Sierra College and doing the mechatronics program, which is a combination of robotics, electrical engineering, and whatnot. It's a pretty broad department, and during my last semester in 2013, I was asked to support a student with disabilities that was interested in the program. So he had taken I think it was 1 or 2 semesters prior, he had started going to Sierra College, got into the program, and he failed both of his classes. And so his dad was really wanted his son to succeed and not just go to like some group home and play with clay all day, but to do something important and make a difference. And my professor approached me and said, hey, we have a student that's interested in taking this program, and you're a really good student, and would you be interested in supporting this student during the next semester? So I said, what the heck? So I said I would do it, and during my last semester, while I was working on my degree, my final project in mechatronics, I started working with this other student, and it turned out great. He passed the class with a B in that class, and I was able to go in the class with him and take notes. The professor didn't have to worry about him because I was there. I had taken the courses before, and I knew what to expect, what was expected, and how I could adapt that to help the student succeed. So that class, we had a lab that was handed to us after like a half-an-hour lecture, and the class was expected to do the lab and get it checked off. But the student most often would just sit there, and I knew he could do it. He just needed like a prompting, like every now and then, or some extra guidance or explanation on what to do. And his confidence was very, very low, and I was able to provide that confidence and support for him during the class. And I also took notes, and then after class, sometimes he wasn't finished with the lab, so I could stay there for like 2 hours after class and help him one-on-one finish the lab he was working on so he can get a passing grade. And so it was a really cool experience, and it took a little bit more time. I was planning on doing like a computer science degree as well, but I dropped that and just started working with this student for more of my time. And then the next semester came up, and the company I work for is Progressive Employment Concepts. And so they're based in Citrus Heights, but we have people down at Davis and in Marysville and up here in Sacramento, Roseville area. So I was interested in pursuing my education, but I was hesitant because I really liked working with this student. So I was like, I would love to if I have more students to work with. So that's how I got introduced to David. And we met over the summer, and I got to know David a little bit, and he was unsure about what he wanted to do with his educational goals. He was just kind of taking general ed classes, and he didn't have a major yet. And as I went to classes with David, we learned that he liked computers, he liked working with his hands, and I was like, hey, the mechatronics program is pretty cool, and that's what I did. And so David got interested in that, and so now last semester he took his first mechatronics class, and he's continuing to pursue that as his goal for our next semester. So it's a pretty neat role I have, because I didn't plan on doing this, and so I'm fairly new to supporting adults with disabilities. But because I've done the mechatronics program, I know what these students need, and so now I help 3 students. And the first student I started working with, he's expected to graduate. Well, he doesn't have his AA, but he's getting a certificate this next semester. And then David, he still has probably another like 2 years or so. And then my other student has about a year. And before they weren't able to even pass a class, or they got really low grades that weren't able to be recognized as like getting a degree eligible grade of like a C or better. So it's been neat that I've been able to have this impact on these students. So some of the things that I do, I think the pros of this setup of having a student support a student with a disability in that program is I know the professors. So I went through their program, I became friends with them, and so when they see me in class, they recognize that I know the material, and they trust that I'm going to teach it accordingly to the students I work with. I also know the campus. I know where things are, so if my student is confused or nervous or scared, I'm there as a support for that, to helping anxiety or stress or just shyness. I can kind of work one-on-one with them, and we can make like a support plan, or like oftentimes one of my students, he doesn't like talking to people. He's kind of shy, so I'll work with him one-on-one, and we'll scribe down some questions that he can ask, or that he, like if he needs materials in the class, I can say, okay. So I work with him and we write down questions together, and then he'll take his little note card and he'll be able to ask what he needs. And so my goal isn't to replace the student and to do their homework, but I'm there as just like a background. And the purpose, or I guess our goal as progressive employment concepts is to slowly phase ourselves out of our clients' lives. Like, I know that sounds bad, but to make them more independent and slowly give them the skills and the tools that they need to be independent. And so with David, I know that he's comfortable in English being by himself, so I sit outside with him instead of going into class with him. And then in mechatronics next semester, we're going to try I'm going to try to get him a buddy to work with in class, and then I'm going to help him outside of class with like additional tutoring or with homework, and getting him the background things, and so he can have that more confidence and feel more comfortable being in school by himself. So, and then another thing that we were trying to achieve with this setup was, if we have students tutoring students, we're making connections with other students, with other people in this program, and then some of us are going to go out and get jobs at like Pepsi company or PG&E or these other companies that need workers, and we're going to be able to make like a bridge. And so if I go out and get another job working at some company, and I can see like, oh, David was really good at computer programming, so I can identify jobs where these students can succeed in, and make this connection and introduce them to this new workplace, and kind of bring them along with me, and kind of give them a job where they can contribute to society and to be a part of the community. So that was something I haven't done yet because I'm still working at Sierra College. And I'm also, I guess, the process of me working at Sierra College, so I'm not hired by Sierra College. I'm signed up as a volunteer, and that came about because I had a good relationship with a professor, and I guess she's the lab tech at Sierra College, so she vouched for me and said, hey, he would be a good volunteer. So she gave me the recommendations through Sierra College for me to sign up as a volunteer. So that's technically what I am at Sierra College. I have a badge that I wear in class, and so since I have that the badge, I'm allowed to be in classes, and so that's why I'm able to go to English department and the mechatronics department and math, and be able to support David and the other students. I've also attended all the counselor meetings where we talk about the future for like the next semesters. I know what course progression should go, and so one of my students was trying to take this class last semester, or he signed up for it this semester, and I was like, nah, that's going to be too much for you. Let's readjust it. And so we set it up so he would take 2 other simpler classes, and it built him up so he would graduate a semester earlier than what he had thought, or what he originally planned. And then I also met with the counselor and talked about the accommodations. So since I'm working with these students one-on-one, as the semester goes on, I'm able to get to know them better and to learn what works and what doesn't. And meeting with the counselor, I'm able to give a third opinion about what these students need to succeed. So it's been a really cool experience, and I really appreciate the opportunity I've had to be a part of it. And I thank you guys for listening, and I hope I'm able to support, or I encourage you guys to not be afraid of college, because there's all these resources out here that are available, and there's so many people that are willing to support you and to help you succeed.
Scott, I'm just curious, and you've addressed this a little bit, but in this process of mentoring and facilitating that you've done with the students that you've worked with, you know, how key do you think it's been the fact that you had that background as compared to an agency simply using one of their existing staff to walk into the mechatronics program or to any of the classes that you facilitated?
So I've talked to some of the other my coworkers that they've supported other colleges, and like one of my coworkers works in like a multimedia class with her student, and they're talking about, I don't know, like crazy crazy like complicated stuff. That's what my supports client mentioned, but like for me, knowing the material, I'm able to understand it and be able to relate it. I can kind of separate it, maybe, and then reword it so it doesn't sound so complicated. Or I can explain the theory of something using something that can relate to the student that the professor didn't talk about. So I know I've been very key in being able to translate or to change something complicated and making it simple, and that's been very helpful for my students.
Out of curiosity, you know, there's been some comments about, you know, the fact that high school and college are very, very different. What is the way that you perceive that? Do you agree with that, or do you think
Yeah.
that? Can you give me like one or two examples?
Well, about the difference between high school.
Mhm.
Well, there's in a community college like Sierra College, they don't have grade distinctions. What?
Explain what you mean by that.
No freshman, no sophomore.
Okay.
Age differences. How are the classes different?
You choose them pretty much.
Oh, yeah, that's right. In high school, you've got to follow the set curriculum, and in college, you're really much more able to choose which classes that you're going to be taking, and they really change depending on which major you're interested in or which classes you're interested in. All right. You mentioned the whole thing about just the evolution of the accommodations that developed for yourself.
Yes.
And you know, the thing that I was thinking of as you were talking about is that, you know, I have experienced a lot of people as they go into college resisting accommodations, not wanting to be set aside and different. The question I have for you is, do you think that the accommodations that you developed and started using in college, have those carried over to the rest of your life, or were those simply valuable in college experience?
No, they've absolutely carried over into everything that I do. So recognizing what your strengths and weaknesses are critical in not only navigating college, but certainly navigating my profession and any profession. So the only difference is that the coping mechanisms are automatic now. They become habit, and they are what I do. So when I was studying and learning the different coping strategies, it was having to retrain myself in the way that I study. And eventually what happens as you start to master those coping strategies, they again become a part of who you are.
One of the questions that I had is that in the within the community colleges isn't so much of an issue, but within the UCs, oftentimes, I was just speaking with a family today, and they were saying that oftentimes when you go to either a CSU or a UC, there may be an expectation of living on campus. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, and if there are supports in that area with student housing and getting along, moving into another environment like that.
Through student housing?
Yeah.
Well, we're very decentralized, which means that we're just specific to students who manage disabilities. We don't really have a connection with housing. We don't have any direct influence with housing. On a rare occasion, if a student who's managing a disability is going part-time because of their disability, and we have written a letter to the registrar's office allowing them part-time for their disability, that we might confer with the housing department to let them know, because they need to be full-time students in order to have housing. But on a general basis, we don't have a real strong connection with that, and not in my experience. When I was at Cal, they have a residence program that allowed students with pretty severe disabilities to live on campus, and they took reduced course loads, and they had specific classes that dealt with developing independence and hiring people to work with them. And since it's expanded to include students that might need to work like Scott and David do. So they have a little more, they work in conjunction with the Department of Rehabilitation in that area. But as far as UC Davis, my experience is the housing element is separate.
Yeah, maybe I could comment as well. If there are any concerns about housing and well, we have one of the issues that's come up are service animals and living on campus. And so we are working more closely with the housing office, and there are folks there, so we can be a point of contact and then help to get folks in touch with people over there. We've had students, probably like at Berkeley too, they want their own room because of issues related to their disability, more quiet. There may be anxiety issues, attention issues. It could be a myriad of things, and we'll help to be a liaison for those kinds of things. We also have some students that we work with who they are going to need. We have some that their mom has come to college with them, and the residence halls would not be appropriate for that. But the housing office on the Davis campus, like most campuses, also networks with off-campus housing. And so our office is a link to that to try to help get people in touch with, those resources that would be, instrumental in making that happen. So there's a lot more. There's a lot more of that going on now in trying, because a lot of students, whether they have a disability or not, want different living environments too. They may want their own apartment, they may want their own room in a residence hall. Certainly on campus it's more difficult because there's, not as much space, and there's a lot of demand because it's so convenient. So I guess to kind of underscore a bit what Abby is saying is that we're a liaison if there are any questions, and we may not have the answers, but we can certainly help to get you in touch with the housing folks. So yeah, I hope that helps.
And I just wanted to ask also, Chris, I know that at UC Davis as well as at Sac State and some other schools, they, in addition to the Disability Center, they also have an Assistive Technology Center.
Yes.
Would you want to do a quick overview of what the AT Center might do?
Right. We have what's called the CAT Center, the Center for Accessible Technology. It's housed in the main library on the Davis campus. Chime in at any time. And and it's really great because what I really like about it, it's very mainstream and any student can use it. So, but if you have a disability and they have your ID number, the students who help out at the counter in the center, you have priority. We're talking large screens, we're talking accessible keyboards, just about anything that you can think of that's pretty mainstream now in terms of accessible technology. It continues to expand, not space-wise per se, but the technology that gets in there. And now I think, if I understand, they're looking at having sort of a satellite in some other libraries on the Davis campus because there's more than just one library. But it's just a wonderful wonderful center, and we are a liaison, so if folks wanted more information about that, we could help to put them in touch.
Right. And well. I know that I was talking to Joshua
Yes.
over at the
Joshua
AP Center
Horry.
at UC Davis.
Great guy.
And one of the accommodations, well, one of the technologies that he mentioned, which, you know, I was struck by the variety of accommodation or technologies that are out there. He was changing the screen colors into colors that gave me a headache, but they were actually designed for people who have migraine issues. And so the range of assistive technology, it goes far beyond, you know, what you may think of.
Right.
And so, you know, my encouragement would be that if you have any question about you know, something that may assist you with it, to seek out the Assistive Technology Center and just check out what they have to offer.
Right, and Joshua is our lead assistive technology specialist on campus, and I can't keep up with the changes in the new technology and the wonderful applications for smartphones and iPads and box.com and expanding and note-taking and smart pens. It just changes. I always encourage any student I'm working with to have just a informational session with him because it changes constantly, and what's available to you as a student with a disability or a student in general is just almost, in some cases, it seems life-changing for some students. Technology that reads for you, technology that takes notes and pictures. Just the LiveScribe pen in and of itself that David mentioned has been some of the best technology that I have seen come along in terms of working with students with cognitive disabilities. You know, I can't take notes because I can't pay attention. And you can even do it with symbology, just creating symbols and then tapping on those symbols. It takes you right to that lecture, that time in the lecture. You can add it, download it in your computer, create PDFs, do word searches. So anyway.
By the way, at the Resource Center here at the Mind Institute, I'm one of the staff who staffs the Resource Center. We have smart pens that people can check out and not check out. But I will demonstrate them with you. And so if you have any interest in exploring what a smart pen can do and whether or not it would be of assistance to you, come into the Resource Center and I'll make some time and we'll explore the smart pen. And Scott, something that comes up a lot, and I know that there are BOG fee waivers, but one of the things that comes up a lot is people are questioning if there are any types of financial supports for students with disabilities, either in terms of special scholarships or things like the BOG fee waiver.
Yeah, through the DSPS appropriation itself, we don't offer any direct what are called cash aid programs. The DSPS funds are set aside specifically for the accommodations and services. However, there are financial aid opportunities through the financial aid office at the community college. So again, I mentioned earlier that a lot of colleges are moving towards this sort of overarching or orientation that's often have a student services component to it, and generally that's where you're going to get a lot of the front-end information on financial aid opportunities. Some of them are unique to individual colleges. There are some federal financial aid opportunities for students with intellectual disabilities specifically that were put into the last reauthorization of the Higher Ed Act, and your financial aid officer on campus would be the best person to talk to about that. Periodically, we will see some grant programs that'll come up as well that are shared throughout the system. But yeah, the financial aid office would be the best one to liaison with.
Hi, I'm Alex Joe. I'm David's high school teacher in Placer County. I came tonight because, and I just want to say too that I'm really impressed with David's success and his progress, Ms. Diab, and his sister Chelsea. I mean, lots of support. Grandmother, yeah. So he's come a long ways, believe me, and his articulation and his ability to run his slideshow and his process tonight was amazing. And of course, Scott, I want to thank you for that support too. I am here because my grandson has special needs, and I wanted to look into the historically black college and university opportunities that might exist, and we came for ideas. And I know that this is California-based, but can you speak to some of the things that might exist that we could transfer and take out of this state and maybe use down in Texas or Florida or Tennessee or?
Well, I'm not sure about a lot of the colleges that would have that kind of focus, but if there's a disability involved, I would choose your college first, and then there's got to be a disabled students program on the campus. And that's probably, if it were me, that's where I'd start. You know, we always talk with prospective students about, you know, why UC Davis, you know, why any college, because you're a student first, and then you have a disability. So you have your dreams, and so you really want to, you know, like a lot of folks here tonight have said, you want to think about what it is you want to do, where you want to be, what's the environment like, how big is the school, is it a quarter system, is it a semester system? Davis is a quarter system. Actually, all UCs are, except Berkeley, of course. Berkeley's just different. Actually, all UCs used to be semester, but then they changed over to quarter, and Berkeley didn't change. So, but that's where I would start. I would think about the college, you know, big picture stuff, and then narrow it. But in doing that, the disabled student programs, there'll be one in every, and that's true for privates and publics. Small liberal arts, you know, everything from Mills College here in California to the Ivy Leagues back east, MIT, any of them. So that's where I would start. And it has come up occasionally where parents kind of get lost, and I totally get that. And you've heard one of us speak or something, and you've got our contact information, let us know. And we'll just refresh my memory, though, or any of ours, and we'll try to see if we can help answer some of your questions. You know, there's nothing worse than being lost out there trying to navigate this.
Hi, my name is Ralph White, and I'm here with my family. We came from Fairfield, and so we're a little bit away from, obviously, Sacramento. So what I was trying to find out is, how do you actually prepare? We're preparing our son for high school, but with a mind to go to college, and we wanted to know what type of things should we do in order to prepare, get ourselves plugged into the right services and whatnot in order to be able to make these transitions. Because we know how difficult it's been transitioning from elementary school to middle school, and from middle school it's going to be a transition to high school, but we realize that you have to start very early in order to be able to do some of these things. So we're trying to find out specifically what should we focus on, since he's just now going to be going into high school soon. What should we be putting our eyes on to get the right preparation so that when he does go to college, he will be going to college. What do we need to do? What do we need to do in order to be able to get ready for that?
I would say the first thing that pops into mind is to, you know, be very proactive. You know, as early as, especially if the student is receiving services and accommodations in the K through 12 system, to really get in tune with what's working and what isn't working, to try any and everything that's offered in terms of services at that level, so that when you engage in the interactive process in the post-secondary level, the college is really in that interactive process supposed to give great weight to the student's particular preference and history of receiving accommodations, what has worked well, what hasn't. Reaching out to those colleges early to see if they have a summer bridge program or possibly even a concurrent enrollment program as well, so they can kind of get on campus physically and get oriented with the college environment as early as possible. Many of them do offer concurrently enrolled programs. And I think, again, just be positive about it. You know, be positive reinforcement about the long-term benefit of education. You can't start too early. I talk to my kids about college already, and they're 8 and 12 years old. You know, about my experiences, how it's benefited me, what I do for a living, and how how that can benefit from them. And I think that sort of positive perspective, that positive interaction with teachers and faculty and staff about finding the best accommodation need that leads to student success early, I think could really translate to that interactive process at the next level as well, where it's a little often, a little more streamlined, then there's less time, and DSPS officers are attempting to liaison with faculty as much as possible in terms of bigger picture strategies in serving this population, but it's challenging, and often you sort of have a set amount of time, and you don't have that same sort of hands-on experience that you may have leading into the college experience. So I think the more that you can bring to that conversation, that we've tried Kurzweil, we've tried these learning programs, we've used these different strategies, study skills, and this is what worked and this is what has not worked. And that way the DSPS office can be the liaison of that information to the faculty as you're choosing classes as well. I know that's putting a lot on you in the interactive process. It should be a 50-50 type thing, but the more you bring to the table, the more informed you are as the parent on the front end, I think the better experience you're going to have moving forward.
And I wanted to add from a non-programmatic viewpoint here, and I think one of the things that all parents can do is help your child learn to advocate for themselves, and starting early doing that. And certainly there are age-appropriate ways to advocate for yourself. And so if you can teach that and help them and involve them in the conversation, it'll make a dramatic difference.
Is it possible to get extra time for tests and homeworks at community colleges or that kind of stuff? That's it.
The question was about extra time. Is it? Yeah. Yes, you can. So again, it would be the determination of how much time and in what environment that extra time needs to be granted, whether it be in class or in a distraction-free environment, or in what particular types of classes you need time, whether it be on tests or assignments or both. That would all be worked out using the tools at hand, that the DSPS office has and that you have. What test scores, prior history, your personal feedback. So it's really not a cookie cutter answer. I can't say that, as a student, you're going to get, with this type of disability, you'll definitely get this amount of time in this type of assignment or test. It's really uniquely customized based on the type of disability you have. But to answer your question is absolutely yes. It's one of the most common accommodations that are granted in community colleges.
For four-year schools, likely not. It would be on a case-by-case basis. You'd have to talk with the faculty member because it's the purview, as they say, of the class instructor. So there may be, but I couldn't blanketly say that that's something that you would have across the board. Part of the problem, too, like in math and science courses, math especially, there's homework every day. And then there may be quizzes, or the homework, is due by, sort of in that lockstep, because if that's not done, and then there's a test coming up next week, and the homework is, relevant to the test. So it really is on a case-by-case basis with the class, the instructor of record, those kinds of things. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, there's really so much gray area in our world. It's really hard to give any blanket answer to any question about whether I will get this particular type of accommodation if I have this particular type of disability. It's really tied into the unique educational or functional limitation that results from that disability, and that's where that professional process that'll happen in the interactive process will really bear that out.
The other thing I wanted to mention, and I've mentioned this before, is that an accommodation may not be appropriate. And I'll give you an example. I worked with a medical student, third year, this is some years back, and its rotation was in the emergency room. You don't get extra time in the ER, you know, so it's really about the essential requirements of the job. And again, case by case, but if, there are ways to work with charting now, a lot of it's computerized, but that's just not, that's life and death situation. But it would happen in nursing programs too, EMT programs. It just depends, but there are some fundamental requirements in some curriculum where there's no extra time. Now, learning the material, books in digital format, books on tape, things like that, that's different, because that's learning the material as opposed to then having learned it well for retrieval when you take the exam. You may not need. We've seen students at Davis over the years where they don't really, if they learned it well and it was multisensory, and time is really only the issue, they may not need the extra time for the exam. It really depends on the course, right? And it depends on your background, of the information, those kinds of things. So I hope that helps.
As the parent of a special needs child, I'm used to having a very active role in my son's education and in his interaction with school staff. I take it up once he hits 18 and he's in college, he requests assistance and he manages that assistance. How do I make sure that I, as a parent, can still work constructively with him in order to support him in what he needs when he essentially gets to set the rules? How do you work with the parents of the students in your work?
Well, I've met many students who come in with their parents, and I'm open to communicating with them while their parents are present. We have, because they're 18, they have to sign a release for us to continue any communication, and it's up to the student to do it. So it's not really been a big issue. Doesn't provide the parent a lot of access to me other than, just sort of talking in generalities and making sure things okay. And did he, if you sent me an email and asked if your son showed up for his appointment, I could let you know. But it's the student that makes the decision of whether or not you have, as a parent, permission or access to me. Does that help? How does that work? Yeah, right. For the most part, I've only, one rare time I had a very sort of hostile moment where parents were like, you're going to sign this or else kind of thing. It didn't come to fruition, but for the most part, parents are there because they want to be helpful, they want to be a positive advocate. We usually talk about what the accommodations are, how the role is, the student. I encourage the student to talk directly with me, not just the parent. So, or make it a communal effort so that we're all working together. As a new student, you heard me before mention about that transitions for everybody. It involves all of us, parents, students, classes, everything. The first part as a new student takes time, and we encourage parents to be part of it, but also we want to see students advocating independently and working for themselves and developing those skills so they can move forward and taking care of what they need to progress.
I just wanted to say that this is part of the transition process, and one of the things that I've noticed over the years, it's the first year, the first quarter, and parents, the students will sign the release, and it's parents checking in, just is everything okay, and it's kind of a team relationship. It's not that there's a lot of information they want. They just want to know just generally, are they coming in to see you, you know, and how are things and rapport, and what can they do at their end to help make them more comfortable with the accommodations? Because oftentimes parents will want, you know, their sons or daughters to use the accommodations, but if they're not convinced they really need them, then so be it. So it's that nurturing, it's trying to listen, it's trying to be respectful of an individual that's beginning to grow up and learn how to be on their own. But you need the parents. If the parents want to be a part of that, then you need to find, I've always found that I need to listen. I need to be there. And if it's nothing more, you know, like in my own family, just to say, it's going to be okay. We're going to stay positive. I mean, that's kind of what you do, right? When you work with folks. So.
The flip side of that is that sometimes a parent has an insight to something that I don't have. So I might get an email from a parent who said, you know, my son or daughter was home this weekend and he or she was really blue or she was really struggling, and I was wondering, and they might even say, oh, don't let them know I contacted you, but what it does is afford me information so I can do the outreach. Hey, how are you doing? I have some time this week. I'd love to get together and talk about how this quarter's going. Why don't you give me a call or come drop by on Thursday? So it becomes a communal thing, and information is beneficial.
For those of you sons and daughters that are here and are hearing that, we're really on the up and up when we do that. We talk with your parents, and we're not trying to be covert or make you feel uncomfortable, but I think you have good relationships typically with your parents, and we want to be respectful of that and to be there as well. So it's not to hide information, but to be, you know, to be there for you as well.
I'm a parent of a son that has challenges, and I'm really curious about the how David and Scott's relationship was set up and what the source of that was. Was it through the regional center? And is funding through that, or how does your company get involved with this, or how are you found, and that type of thing?
All right. So I work for Progressive Employment Concepts, and they're funded through Alta, California. And I'm fairly new, so I don't know all the the logistics or whatnot about that, but that's who I would contact if you're interested in looking into this as Progressive Employment Concepts. You could just Google it. We're like the first one on the page there. And from there, our relationship, Carol Watillo, she's the, Carol and Rob run the company, and I started working with one client, and then David was interested in working, and she's like, hey, your profiles are pretty similar. You're both interested in the same things. So she hooked me up with David, and then same with my other two clients. We had very similar goals in life and direction and what we wanted to do. So that's how she kind of runs her whole organization, is finds support staff that have the same desires and same direction, so to help keep us progressing together.
Hello, I'm Nicole. I'm David's mom. And just to answer that question a little bit more, to set up services for David, we've gone through the regional center. They offered a variety of things. Most of them were along the lines of a day program where you go and you spend time. They were less individual, more group setting. And David wasn't as comfortable with that, and I definitely wasn't as comfortable with that. So we pursued other options and actually requested, there's a few companies that do a little bit more individualized services. So David's support comes from a variety of places. He has the Sps Service office. He has the Alta Regional. He also has Department of Rehab Services. We kind of pull everything together to give him the program he has now. It's very specific and tailored to him, so it's not 9 to 3 and you're done. It's whatever time, wherever place he goes, he can be supported. And that can transition from the college setting out to the employment and the workforce. So our goal in setting up something for him was very specific to his abilities and his needs. I know a lot of programs are more group-oriented. But it really takes asking and doing research. There are numbers of companies who do this type of support. You just have to know to ask the right questions.
Go for it.
I have a question for Scott. Do the community colleges in our area here offer pretty much the same resources and services to students with disabilities? And the colleges I have in mind are American River College, Sac City College, and Sierra College.
Yeah, for the most part, there are some of them have more robust services for maybe subpopulations like veterans with disabilities. Some colleges will have a veteran center that has a little more more actively involved with the DSPS program than others. Some don't even have veteran center. That's just one example. Another difference is earlier, I don't know if you heard earlier, I mentioned we have a partnership program piggybacking on what the lady in the back just mentioned. It was a partnership between the regional center, Department of Rehab, and the Chancellor's Office to develop what's called a college to career program, which is a combination of both regular general courses and special classes designed specifically for students with disabilities, with additional in-class supports that's a little bit above and beyond what DSPS would normally provide. It's a cohort group. There's a certain number of slots per year, and it's very job-centered, hence the partnership with Department of Rehabilitation. So it's really outcome-driven on the end in terms of employment opportunities, and that's offered only at Sac City College currently within the Los Rios district, although we're looking at expanding that program as well. But for the most part, they generally have the same types of accommodations, the same type of assistive technology opportunities. The other difference would be what are called special classes, DSPS special classes. So in addition to providing services, our funding also allows for the development of credit and non-credit courses that are designed specifically for students with disabilities. And they're generally coded, if you look in the catalog, under something like DSS 101 or DSS 102, something like that. And they're generally coupled together within the course catalog. And the different offerings between the different colleges you mentioned, there are different offerings between the different colleges you mentioned, so you might want to look at that as well. But in terms of the accommodations themselves, they're generally very similar.
I'd just like to do a couple of quick comments. I do see two questions in the back. The first one is that as far as community colleges go, you know, there's obviously a wide range of things that are available in terms of certificate programs as compared, you know, and as well as like, you know, more career kinds of oriented things. Right. Something that I have found very helpful for the students that I have worked with is simply taking an internship class. Internships are one of the best ways of someone actually getting a job post-college as compared to just filling out applications. And again, we're going to cover that on the next workshop that we're doing. And if you want to do an internship in a for-profit agency or company, you have to be in an internship class. And the internship classes that are offered at the community college are very, very basic requirements to be in them, but they have a huge payoff in that they will help you set up a quality internship, and help to make sure that internship it actually is doing what an internship should do, which is not just be volunteering for a place, but really getting good job skills. So that's one of the things I really wanted to plug for on the community college level. And I think within the UC and the CSU level is also taking advantage of internships as well as the actual coursework. As far as quick comment back to you is that you were mentioning what can families do in preparing a young student. One of the things that again, the work that I do with younger students is to work with the family towards backing off on some of the reminders and oversight, and really putting that responsibility, not just putting the responsibility, but helping people develop the types of tools so that they can start that process of scheduling things on their own, putting everything into electronic trackers. There's a program that one of our researchers at the Mine Institute recommends, which is Studies, which is an app that you can download for very little money. We have no vested interest in Studies. But it's a tool that they have found to be very, very successful in terms of allowing students to really track that and develop those habits, because, again, once they're off, you're going to have, that's a very tough time to learn it with all of the chaos of college, is to start to learn how to do your own scheduling and tracking. Studies. And again, if people have questions, I work here in the Resource Center. Feel free to contact me. I'll be glad to sit down and discuss, different things that have happened tonight.
Hi, I thought that I would address a couple of the questions. I'm a parent, and I have a 26-year-old and have a little bit of hindsight at this point. My daughter was in the college to career program at Sac City. I think it's really important to assess your child's abilities, because that program was not successful for her. Although she was in a transition to independent living program at Taft Community College, which was a residential program. And although she didn't have one-on-one support there, that was successful. So it really requires taking a look at each individual program. As Nicole mentioned, you really have to cobble together different services to meet the individual needs of your kid, and take a hard look at each of the programs to see how independent your child needs to be. And as Steve just mentioned, it all goes back to that self-determination, self-advocacy. That seems to be the biggest criteria in establishing how successful they'll be.
One other question for the college staff. It was mentioned that people should start to contact the Disability Center as early as possible. Is that possible to do before you actually enroll in or are accepted in the college? Okay. And I asked that question partially because, going back to the gentleman who was asking about how to choose a college, again, I think that's something, after you've really established what you're looking for in a college. Personally, I would really recommend, contacting the Student Disability Center, or whatever they happen to call it at that location, and seeing what they have to offer. Did you have?
No, I disagree with you. As early as possible.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.